Excellent.
So you want to explain us, John? You're the
I'm just
driver.
I was just posting that we are live.
You call this?
This is Plutopia Live on what date is this? On April the
It's the 11th, the 11th of 34th in the year Zaphod.
April 28th, 2020, in the midst of a global pandemic. We are broadcasting from cyberspace. And our guests tonight, well, I should say our regulars tonight are me, John Lebkowsky, Scoop Sweeney, Maggie Duval, and Suzy Shelor. And then in addition to that, we have as our special guest, David DeMaris.
Yay.
Hey, Dave. Are you there, Dave?
Show them what you got.
Sing us a song.
What's the name of that song, John, that I'm going to sing you? Could be anything. I'll make it up.
We thought you could do the official Plutopia Marching Anthem.
Yeah.
How about Bohemian Rhapsody?
Ooh.
No, it has to be one nobody's ever heard before.
Yeah, if you do a copyrighted tune, then the Zuckerberg
March,
will
Plutopia Marching
come
Anthem.
after you.
Yes, there you go.
Okay.
Here we go.
Plural utopias. We've got all kinds of things in here. That's great. We've got here. We've got both kinds of music.
Yeah.
All the flavors of love.
The flavors of
We've
love.
got hell down below. We've got heaven above. We've got plural utopias. Plutopia for sure.
Yay.
Awesome.
So
I
this is
need
a
to
good
have
time
a
to
big lighter
mention.
to light. We need to have our big lighters.
It's a good time to mention that David was the guy who named Plutopia.
Yeah.
When we were talking about pluralist utopias, and you came up with that portmanteau,
Yeah.
and we have been Plutopia ever since.
Any portmanteau in a storm.
And that was after a particularly grueling project we had of the installation of the DIY Home of the Future at Maker
right.
Faire here in Austin, the first year they had Maker Faire. And David, a very brave person, volunteered to kind of pull everything together and make it work. And it was a lot of work.
Wow.
Yeah. And wasn't there something happened with an ant pile or something? Wasn't there ants involved?
I did eventually, after 48 or 72 hours of nonstop work or something, when we finally got the thing up and running, I went outside to try to take a little nap in the parking lot under the one or two trees that were out there at the Travis County Expo Center.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there were fire ants.
That's
No
not-
fun.
Because of course there were fire ants.
Do y'all remember the story that when I arrived there with one of two trucks full of gear, most of which was borrowed from the University of Texas, that in our spot there was a margarita machine
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember
right in the
that.
middle
Oh,
of it.
that's
And
great.
so of the time that we had scheduled for setup, I spent about the first 3 or 4 hours trying to figure out what to do about that.
Yeah, I think
How
we
to
had to
make
go
that
track
thing go
somebody
away.
down, right? And get them to move it.
Yeah, well,
We should have kept it.
Can we move it?
Mhm.
And then eventually they just gave us a different space.
Shows
that
where their
was
face was a little
priorities
bit
were.
weird.
Margaritas above music.
It's hard to get mad at a margarita.
Well, it wasn't a functional margarita machine, or
Ah.
a lot better,
unfortunately.
but yeah, anyway, that was
Yeah, it was, we all worked together putting that together, and I wanted to help on that, but then I ended up going that year to Bioneers to help run a workshop.
Well, that's where you were.
That's where I was, yeah. I was torn.
Pioneers.
But we had Bon Davis and we had Psyche and I don't know, other people, maybe Bill.
Joey
Blum.
Lopez.
Was he
part
there?
of wasn't he part of the pulling together on that? And Derek, of course, and
first year. Or other
yeah,
years?
I just remember, yeah, that first year, because that's when I met you all, and it was wasn't it the old Polycot offices, John?
Yeah, we did a lot of scheming there. We sort
Yeah.
of planned things in those offices. That was the former home of Grok Books, which later became Book People.
Oh wow.
And it was kind of funny. We just stumbled into that thing. I think Matt Sanders found that. And the whole Maker Faire thing started because I was sitting in that office one day thinking about, I was looking at some stuff about Maker Faire that they had just had in California. And just on a whim, I sent an email to my friend Mark Frauenfelder, who was the editor of Make Magazine. And I said, hey, you guys ought to do one here in Austin. And they did. They said, oh, hey, that's a really good idea.
Oh, that's great.
They did like two, really. They did one that year and the following year. And it was just, I think they had a lot of logistical difficulty because they tried to haul all kinds of stuff out here from California, as I recall. So the Maker Fairs became more of a local thing after that. Are they still happening? Do you know, Maggie?
Cami from Austin Tinkering School revived it and as a mini Maker Faire, and then quickly grew it and expanded it and made it successful. And then everything kind of imploded with Make, or I'm not sure the full story there, but none of that's happening anymore.
Yeah,
even pre-COVID. Yeah.
Well, it was fun while it lasted.
I'll see you guys later.
Well, even the dogs, have words to say about Plutopia. John sucked me into it in 2010. That was a lot of fun. We hadn't seen each other in 40 years, probably.
Yeah, I don't even remember exactly how we hooked up again.
We hooked up on Facebook just by mutual friends, and I remember that guy from when I was in third grade.
Yeah,
went downhill from there.
Yeah, Scoop and I went to the same elementary school.
Yes, Park Hill Elementary, the Park Hill Panthers. They were.
Yeah.
That's Big Spring, Texas.
They were terrible.
Right?
Oh
yeah,
yes.
Big Spring, Texas. That's like an Episcopal day school now, I think.
Oh wow.
But we digress. David DeMaris is here. Have you brought some show and tell, right? You've got some things you want to share with us.
Yeah, I could share a few. So right before the lockdown began, and I was like an early adopter, I decided that before the official announcement that I had to be done and I had to cancel 2 gigs that were during the South by Southwest week that I set up. So one was a jazz group that I've been working with. I have not really played a lot of live jazz, except for the kind of stuff that we were doing over there, which a little bit jazzy, I guess. But I had a quintet that was going to play out in the yard at the Vortex. I'm going to cancel that. And then I had a band that I've been playing with for a couple of years, which I guess I would say is led by a fellow named Mike Hurwitz, who is a counselor at a nonprofit and an activist with several different organizations. And he's a fine songwriter. And his heart is in a good place. And he thought there needed to be this like resistance rock thing a few years ago. For some reason, he was motivated and
I wish
Hear
more
the
people had
sound of
been.
hand washing or something.
I don't know.
I think it's in my house, and this microphone is loud enough that we can hear it. So yes. So anyway, I've been playing with this band for a few years. My dog's kind of tangled up in the headphones here.
Occupational hazard.
This band that you're playing in, the one you're talking about,
Yeah.
is it it's the Resistance Band? Is that what you're
Swerve,
nice.
Swerve.
I wish more people were doing that.
And we've played many gigs in the last 2 years, and we were kind of just about gearing up to release an album and have an album release party, and we're still doing that, still in progress, and we're trying to figure out some way to do like a virtual release thing and have it not be boring, so we might do a Zoom video or something.
Those are pretty cool, watching everybody playing together the same song. I don't know how they're doing it, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think they're faking it.
I think they might be.
I think they're lip syncing in many cases.
Aren't
You're
they?
giving away
Did
all
you
the
see
secrets.
Did you guys see the one with I think it was Willie Nelson's son, and and Ringo Starr, and they did a cover of, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the song. Oh, Take a Load Off Annie. Heavy, or The Weight, I think it's called.
Yeah, The Weight.
Yeah. And they made it seem like they were all doing it at the same time, but I just don't see how that's possible. I mean, is there bandwidth for something like that? Is that even possible?
Yeah, well, I'm
used to
playing
talk about
around
how-
with some software that is intended to let you do music streaming fast enough to be able to feel it. Like I've tried, so Zoom is not fast enough for this, the delay. I mean, even though it feels very natural when you're talking, like, have you ever tried to just do something in time, like clack together? Like, check this out.
Not gonna.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
1. It doesn't.
That
So
right,
like
doesn't.
playing jazz or something like that is. I think I've seen some choir music that looked like it was working. So I think if you have a conductor, and
if you have a lot of
everybody is-
intricate notes, you might have a problem.
Yeah, I've
8
seen some
notes.
ambient
I thought about
music
this a
that
lot.
works.
You know, the Rolling Stones did You Can't Always Get What You Want on that.
They're
Yeah.
totally lip singing it, man.
That's what I was wondering
Trust
about.
me,
I mean,
as a
Trust
as a
me.
it looked to
musician.
me like an impossibility, really.
Although if the tech exists to make it happen, I would kind of believe that they might have it.
They might.
I did see a
so
video
anyway,
of Jack Cassidy playing within the background. There was a big screen in his living room, big screen TV with a projection of Jorma Kaukonen playing from wherever he was. So Jorma Kaukonen was playing in Ohio, and I think Cassidy was in the Bay Area, and it looked like they were kind of syncing pretty well, but I don't know. I don't know how they accomplished that.
I think
the best I've been able to find out is I've got a thing called Jamulus that is supposed to allow you to hear the music fast enough to be able to play together, but there's no video, or you can kind of have Zoom running or something for the video, but it's probably not going to be that synced up, but you can talk about. And it's also got a built-in chat window, so you can just say what jazz standard are we going to play, or what key are we in, or something. But
We're going to have to go back to old rotaries, aren't we?
I'm on the verge of that, but just sort of rewinding to where. So yeah, actually, I canceled 3 gigs because the other one was an ambient music showcase that was going to happen at Scottish Rite Theatre. So some good friends of mine have been producing something called Enoscapes for 3 years. This would be the 3rd year.
You say
What is-
Enoscapes?
Yeah, what is that?
So it's ambient music, and it's done live, and every artist brings video with them.
Okay.
The first year I did the video live and just played canned music tracks that were ambient music that I had done in the past. And the second year, all the video was pre-composed and projected, and the music was all live. In my case, anyway, in everybody else's case. So anyway, this year they had gotten asked to do that at the last minute, and I I thought I might play a piece that nobody has heard except for Daryl, the organizer of the festival that I
Oh, wow.
put together. And he's not playing
Yes.
live. It is a thing that I kind of, like when I was a wee teen music wannabe, there were a few of these guys around that were like synthesizer wizards that did classical music. Well, guys and gals. It was Wendy Carlos was the first. But my favorite was Isaiah Tomita. And he did like Debussy music and Firebird Suite by Stravinsky and all that
Oh,
stuff.
wow.
So at some point I figured out, oh, there are all these like archives of MIDI files now. So maybe I should go out and start doing some, synthesizer orchestrations of classical music.
Wow.
Uh,
That's
so
fun.
I've
What
yeah.
a fun
done
project.
a few of those, and maybe like on Christmas, I'm not completely committed to Christianity, but there are a couple composers that I like that are. So I have used their music to do this. But the one that I picked for this was by this composer, Gesualdo, who was kind of a late medieval Renaissance guy. And I first heard about him in a book by Aldous Huxley.
Oh, wow.
He's kind of a notorious character because he murdered his wife and her lover and went insane. But
As can happen.
can happen.
Especially in a
inclined
apparently.
towards jealous rages.
Your typical music business story.
But his music was pretty sophisticated for the day, and
Mhm.
it's beautiful to listen to in its original form, and people are still performing it. Werner
wow.
Herzog has a documentary about the life of Gesualdo. You're kind of walking around the buildings where all this happens and listening to his droll
Oh, wow.
commentary about,
How is
his
that
art.
spelled?
Is it still good art?
Yeah, I
Can
was
we-
just gonna
we
ask
still
that.
enjoy it, even though this person is horrible. So then I took it and I slowed it way down, like 10 times or something.
As one does.
Yeah, because it seemed to work. So as a madrigal, I think it was 3 minutes or something, and as a piece of ambient music, it is about 20 minutes. So
Oh, wow.
how about if I roll a few?
Yeah, please
of that?
do.
Right.
Wow.
Oh, that's really slow.
Wow. Wow. Dang.
Yeah.
You said it's like a 3-minute madrigal that you've slowed down to 20 minutes. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
something like that. But I think the thing that you would probably notice is that it's kind of dissonant. I mean, it's
Yeah.
on the edge of consonance and dissonance in a way that no one else did until the 20th century, like maybe even
Okay.
the mid-20th century. And that's why Aldous Huxley was writing about him.
Mhm.
Anyway, so that was the thing that
How is his name spelled?
Gesualdo. And there's
LDO,
plenty of his
okay.
music out there on
Yeah.
all the usual spots to hear. So that was
So-
a thing that had to get put on the.
That's
pretty
back burner
cool. I
some
like
other
that.
time.
That's great.
Was this going to be part of South by or sort of adjacent?
It was
to?
it was like not an official South by
Mhm.
event, but it was something where I guess maybe the whoever's running the Scottish Rite these days decided they needed to put something up, and they had worked with those guys before, like I think in multiple projects. So they said, hey, we know you're doing this ambient music thing. How would you like to do it this year at the Scottish Rite during South by? And that seemed okay, because we had done it on Eno's birthday, which is in the summer. I forget exactly when, June or July. And we had done it. The first year was at the Museum of Human Achievement, which is not really where you want to do something in the summer.
Yes.
Because if you've been there, you'll
yeah.
understand. There's no AC. So then we did it at the North Door last year, and that was better. And a really nice big projection surface. So that. So anyway, so the swerve left thing is I've been, one of the things that's been keeping me busy the last 3 months, and kind of thought it would be done by now, but I'm still working on it, partly because we've got some people who are real sticklers for perfection or something. But this kind of a fun song, I think, that I did not write, but I thought about it. I kind of had this inspiration that they, said, like, why don't you write that song? Why don't you write that? So like several rehearsals running, did you write it yet? And I'm like, no. And I'm like, okay, we're going to write it. I later found out that there is a scene in Ghostbusters 2, which I did not see as far as I know when it came out, but maybe.
I didn't know there was a 2.
There is a 2. And there's a scene where the Statue of Liberty comes to life and is like walking around. And that was kind of the image that I had in a dream, or, singing in the shower or something. And so
nice.
Mike wrote this song it's kind of like a heavy rock song. Like most of our stuff sounds pretty classic rock in a lot of different genres, but this one is more the heaviest one. And then it has a kind of a psych rock section in the middle that I thought was fun. So I'm going to cue that up.
Yeah.
Lady Liberty, she's mighty pissed, you see. In truth, she's come on board, rampaging through the city streets, carrying a scale and sword, and a torch that lights the way ahead for the hard-fighting women below, with fire shooting out of her eyes, knocking down Trump Tower with drops of fire.
Excellent.
Lady Liberty, she's mighty angry. When you spend centuries without autonomy, in truth, it makes you sore. Lady Liberty has thrust the chains aside. She just can't take it no more. We shall have dominion of ourselves, of our bodies, hearts, and minds. We're taking this path trodden to the streets. We are righteous, and we're fighting now. Liberty, she's mighty angry.
Liberty, liberty, liberty,
Liberty. That's nice.
Lady Liberty, she's mighty best you see. In truth, she's come on board, rampaging through the city streets, carrying a scale and sword, and a torch that lights the way ahead for the hard-fighting women below, with fire shooting out of her eyes, knocking down Trump Tower with just one blow. Lady Liberty,
Nice.
she's mighty angry. Lady Liberty, she's mighty angry.
Yeah, that was really good.
I kept getting a.
Wow.
I
That
kept
was
getting
perfect.
I kept getting an image in my head of, you know, in Spinal Tap when they're doing Stonehenge and they're coming. I was imagining the flagpoles around the Washington Monument somehow. Like, I don't know. It's like that's what I was seeing. And she's rampaging through. It's pretty awesome.
I feel like Lady Liberty is like
Oh, there you
close
go.
to me right now.
So,
I like the flame shooting from her eyelids. That was my
Yeah.
favorite.
yeah, that was somebody else's vision. I didn't think of that one. So the vocalist on that is Julia Austin, who some of you would maybe remember if you go way back from the band The Horsies.
Oh yeah.
And that is the scene. And what I will tell you is if you start this track at the same time as this scene, it's like, you know, Dark Side of the Rainbow.
Oh, nice.
How funny.
So
Okay,
we-
so what's how many seconds in? How many minutes
Now
in
you
is
just
that?
start them right together at the same time, and it's
Oh, okay.
Oh,
it's
that's
pretty
gonna be
good. So,
awesome. Yeah, okay.
and
I'll check
we
that
have
out.
some other ideas if we think we can get away with snagging this clip and like
Why
see how those
not?
people are like looking out. Like, what if they were us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we know any video wizards that can make that happen?
Huh.
Possibly.
Let me think.
Well, all right. So there's that.
Brilliant.
Yeah, we need to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, that's what we would have done at the opening party if it was on.
Dang.
So yeah, all these images like hit the streets and all the stuff is now seems kind of, that's a little frustrating. You know, for
Oh
this
man,
kind of
I'll
band,
say.
like, but we will persevere, and I think it's all relevant. Maybe we'll hear another song at the end or something. But
Yes.
Have there been any in the midst of lockdown? Have there been, you know, of course you can't play together the same way. You're trying to figure that out. But have other ideas come bubbling up for you or the other people you've been collaborating with?
well, we have talked about what we could do for a kind of release event, and yeah, we've had a couple of band meeting hangout sessions with drinking involved. That's about what we've got.
That's about it.
And you know, I think it's pretty pressing now. I have been pretty busy because I'm just like relentlessly finessing these tracks. Like we recorded them in a studio with at a place called Space in South Austin. Fine place. Would go again. And
That's on Manchac, isn't it?
it is on Manchac,
Mhm,
pretty far down there. And then we took those raw tracks and brought them into my studio. So this is the room where all that mixing and mastering magic works. And
Cool.
that particular song, there were a couple, I mean, mostly it was all like, live rock, right, direct to hard drive. And but that one, like that middle section, had some guitar overdubs where I took my laptop over to somebody's house and plugged them in and said, play it again. And I just kind of went through and collaged all the stuff together until I was happy.
I know there are some bands and films that are trying to figure out how to open or drop, so to speak.
Yeah.
And in fact, this is not something I would ever watch, but it's intriguing to me. Just I may check it out just to see how they did it. But the movie Trolls or Trolls 5 or something like that apparently is revolutionizing the way that movies are going to be dropped from now on. So
my daughter
don't
just
know.
mentioned that today. Yeah.
Did she? Yeah.
The films that we're going to screen at South by Southwest are apparently screening right now on Amazon Prime.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, it's crazy. It's just crazy. And I think also we're going to go back to, I'm not back to, but I think we're probably going to explore the homeschooling, the charter schooling, the, socially distant schooling. I think that's going to become a bigger deal. That's just my feeling, just watching how this is going forward. I think that parents are going to want to homeschool their kids more often just because of the ease, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of an open question. There's a huge backlash right now, and you can see it in social media, people who are saying, why the hell are we doing this? Let's stop, let's not.
Yeah.
And obviously the states are starting to talk about that. And the kind of more aggressive lockdown was never something that could go on forever, but I think they're going to back off for it. Might be a little too soon. And the big question is whether, even though you tell people it's okay to go out and shop, are they going to go out and shop, or are they going to think, man, I don't want to go out there?
And that'll determine whether or not they stay open.
Yeah, the whole issue of schooling online has upset a lot of people, mostly the financial people, simply because they don't make as much money per student on this, online learning. They like having their bodies in place in seats in schools and getting each money per head, kind of like selling cattle.
And every kid can go to the same school. It's not about what teachers teach where. You could actually go to whatever school that you want. I mean, relatively speaking, you're not relegated, however, to the neighborhood you're in, I would think. There's got to be some pluses out of this.
Yeah, I'm just amused by the fact that I spent the whole of my daughter's upbringing, exploring this very issue, and now suddenly it's here for everybody. And my whole thing was, I didn't understand why we had to separate, keeping these different silos: work, home, and family. And I'm a big proponent of lifelong learning, and a lot of people are talking about the kids, but I sure know a lot of people who got their college degree and then just stopped learning the minute they got the degree. I mean,
right.
It's like,
done.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, what a boring life. I can't even imagine that. I want to learn as much as I can anyway. And I've always been interested in the whole idea of the adults and the kids, like Reggio Emilia, the town in Italy, where after, from the way I understand the story, after they were bombed out by World War II, there were no schools and no teachers really. So the community decided to get together, and everyone in the community taught the children. Right. So it was more like mentorship, apprenticeship, and, in the field learning, and so on and so forth. And they built like schoolhouses that were porous to the community. They weren't siloed off. It was like, there was flow between work and life and all that. So I'm curious about that, because as I sit in my little tree perch here, I look down in the cul-de-sac and I'm seeing there's a lot of families here, and they all seem so happy. The parents are home with their kids.
Yeah, I'm seeing that too.
And the kids are out running around and all that stuff. And I'm just, if once it's a little bit safer to go out, I'd love to just wheel down my barbecue and just talk to everybody and see what their experiences have been like during this whole thing. I think it's going to completely change. I mean, wasn't our modern school system built to provide factory workers, basically? I mean, it's like,
yes, and now it's for prison. It's for prisoners, pretty much now. It's just a funnel directly, which is they will end up being factory workers.
Same thing.
I think. Yeah, exactly.
Uber drivers.
One interesting thing that I've read was complaining about online education from a lot of college professors, instructors, teachers' aides, that it allowed their bosses to keep an eye on what they're doing, how well they're doing. They felt like that the electronic media was being used to not only teach, but to keep an eye on what these teachers are saying, how they're teaching, who they're teaching, what they're teaching. And there was concern on that, which I could see some, validity to that. But
well, that's sort of like the way we keep an eye on Plutopians, right?
Oh, I keep an eye on you all the time.
Yeah, you probably actually do. I mean, if it's anywhere near sitting with my dog, and then you're halfway there. So.
I'm just curious I wonder how many people, I've heard people mention something similar to this, but the whole idea of the rat race and the getting up in the morning and like going to the job and you're working the thing and you come home and you're exhausted and you hate your family and then you go back the next day and then, like on the weekend, then you go all shopping at Walmart or Home Depot or something. And then you go back, so like all of a sudden, being forced to pause and think like, oh wait, I feel like, talking heads, life or not life, well that too, life during life, but you may find yourself in a shotgun. I don't know, letting the days go by. I'm just curious. It's really fascinating to me, like where are, a lot of people said, do we actually want to go back to that? Like, what's the point?
So.
Yeah. Yeah.
So some of you, I know John was there and Maggie, I don't remember, but I gave a talk at an EFF meeting a few years ago called Rhythm and Collective Intelligence, which was
I didn't see that one.
Title. It's out on YouTube, I think.
Okay.
So it was a title that sort of popped into my head one day once I got this idea of collective intelligence in my head. And I've always been pretty fascinated with rhythms and oscillations and neuroscience. And then I started thinking, well, like, what about, social networks and just the way we live? Like, and we've kind of gone through this big, like, step function now where, like, the rhythm is destroyed. Now that we're kind of arrhythmic. And we've been progressing in that direction anyway. I think some of the things that I talked about were, like this sort of like we used to have a somewhat unified culture with television and, the news being like this rhythm of like, okay, maybe the whole family or the adults would be together there, watching.
Everybody was in sync, right?
The two things. Everybody was kind of in sync. And there's this moment where you come in sync and you hear what the newscaster thinks about, or what they're telling you. And then you go off and like during the week, you're talking to the people that you work with. And on the weekend, you're talking to different people, maybe a bigger collection of people. So these network sizes and the way information flows through the network has this particular rhythm. And when I thought about it a little bit, I don't think there's been like a lot of sociological research in this, like, but you might say that like the invention of the weekend was the biggest thing that like enabled progress or something, when there are a lot of people with agendas who would say it was something else, but maybe this just rhythmic change in the network structure was kind of the biggest thing that ever happened, but it's not really recognized or something.
Mhm.
Well, think about how it's changed from a time when everybody got their news from pretty much the same source that was vetted the same way, and they got about 10 minutes of news every day. And now we have people who are getting news 24/7, and they've got different sources, and it's not really necessarily news. It's just various forms of infotainment and weird ideological stuff. I'm shocked at some of the stuff that I've seen come across my Facebook activity stream, especially about, let's say, talking about the COVID antivirus and the COVID antivirus. The COVID virus.
From Symantec.
Did
Okay,
Revelations
I've lost my way.
predict the antivirus?
I was sitting there thinking,
But COVID, there are so many sort of weird theories that are circulating that are really driven by ideologies. They're not informational. It's like perspectives that are politicized totally, and they don't even see it. They don't see that they're following a sort of political party line.
No, they don't, and it's really heartbreaking to see the manipulation. I mean, to just go full, a lot of folks are going full conspiracy theory on this thing, and I just can't understand it. I mean, what the Chinese did not. I mean, in my estimation, I do not believe that the Chinese tried to do this to us on purpose. I could be wrong, but some of the stuff I'm seeing on my Facebook feed too are things like that are just, people are so lost and confused with no leadership that the conspiracy theories are rolling out like crazy.
Yeah.
My favorite ideology is that the G5 cell towers are causing all of the causing the coronavirus, and people are actually going around all over the world burning cell towers.
Oh,
they're the new witches. I mean, Salem's got nothing on these people. And
windmills,
the people are
cancer.
taking that seriously.
And Lysol injection they're taking seriously. They were calling them poison control. I mean, what?
I went out and bought some Lysol stock after Trump did that. Jeez.
I had a good example here that I tracked down where this, and this is like a right-wing publication. They're saying COVID-19 is not as dangerous as you think. And the analysis is based on the death rate. And I think the argument is that why aren't we locking down if more people are not dying? Yes, people are dying, but it's not that many people that are dying.
They're not our people.
And as I pointed out to them, I said the death rate is not really the relevant statistic that you should be looking at. It's really the surge in critical care hospitalization.
And these people have been tested.
to do, yeah, I mean, when we're trying to flatten the curve, it's because we don't want to overwhelm healthcare systems. It's not because we're trying to prevent deaths, though that is actually something we also should be trying to do. But it's also because, and it's primarily because, we don't want to overwhelm the healthcare system, which probably would mean more people would die than would die otherwise.
I hope we're prepared for the next wave in autumn, in fall, because Fauci's pretty confident that it's coming back, and it's not
a lot like Brad Pitt, doesn't he?
Brad Pitt's starting to look more like him, I think.
There it is.
But President Donald says it's okay. It's going to go to zero, and he'll be the hero.
He is a zero hero.
It's a miracle.
I was commenting, maybe it was your wall or somebody's wall the other night. The conspiracy theories, not only from the right wing. I've seen a lot of people I would have considered progressive, open-minded before, who are going off the deep end with conspiracy theories. And then you have in the sort of spiritual new age kind of realm, messianic, like, our new world is emerging and I will lead it there. I'm helping to be, like, okay, that's great.
I alone.
It's definitely a thing of I alone. But yeah, it's like, I'm actually feeling for people that are in total chaos. My whole life has been chaos. So I'm kind of like, okay, same shit, different day. Excuse my French.
That's okay. We're on the internet.
Okay. Yeah. But I'm really feeling for people that, forever, maybe their entire lives so far, they've seen, like, you do this thing, you follow this path, you get your mortgage, you do your thing, whatever. And then, like, oh my God, nothing makes sense anymore. But this was already starting after, look, I'm gesturing like Donald Trump.
Playing the accordion.
Yeah, I mean, this is starting before COVID hit. Like, how many times did you see somebody mention, oh my God, can it get any weirder? Oh my God, can it get any weirder? For the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, you haven't seen anything yet. Oh, and now we got the UFOs, the Navy.
Right. I remember seeing that footage when it first came out, but now it's making what was that, like at least a year ago it first came up, and now they're just fully admitting it. Is that what I saw?
Yeah, they're saying they're UFOs. We don't know what they are. They're not weather balloons.
Everything is wrong. There's a great Fireside Theater album that sounds pale in comparison to the real life that we're living right now. And their premise was everything is wrong and the aliens have taken over.
Yeah.
Reptiles, alien reptiles.
Well, they're telling us the truth about that because the stuff about the coronavirus is so bad. I mean, they've just given up and said, yep, there's aliens. We're not going to try to hide it anymore.
So the same videos actually came out, I think, 3 years ago, because there was a funded program for a while. And when the program ended, I guess some of the people, I don't know how they got permission, but they somehow started a company. They use those videos as kind of like part of their startup pitch or something to say, like,
that was their collateral.
Stuff must be possible, so give us money to try to develop it. Like, it's got to be like one of these things. And so it's the same video that popped up about 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow!
Well, that's a great financial idea.
Exactly
John, we should have thought of that when we were financing the news network. I mean, I could have claimed to have a storage shed full of aliens. And
oh yeah,
did we finance the news network?
Yes, we did, and boy, was that fun.
Do you have a bake sale to do it?
Yeah,
yes.
Bake sale's a good idea.
They're not teachers.
So I had a little bit of an arc in mind for my talk, that I get to hype one more event, but I get to talk about science a little bit. Since, John hype, said he's a computational neuroscience.
Yeah, I'd like to come back.
Even is computational neuroscience, and what does it have to do with operas? So in terms of like home education, I actually did this kind of theoretical computational neuroscience stuff quite a while ago. It's actually been almost 20 years.
Wow.
But I was going to conferences and talking about I don't think I completely realized at the time, but you could call it neural field theory. So it's kind of a different idea about what's going on in your brain that said, like,
say it again. I'm sorry. Say it again.
Field theory.
Okay.
In that sense, you're basically saying, well, mostly people in neuroscience think about one neuron talking to another. So it's kind of like circuits and little pulses flow between them. And we've got all these different parts of your brain, but the way to understand those different parts is by looking at the circuits in detail. And that's been kind of the way it is mostly forever. And I was part of this strange little subculture, chaos theory and neural field theory. And so I recently rewrote piece of the fundamental base layer of the software and made it a little bit fancier that I use in my PhD. And I'm trying to make kind of a little bit of a comeback in the computational neuroscience world. So if you don't mind, I'll share my screen.
Please do, yes.
And oops, there you are.
I shared mine first.
My email. Full screen with this. Escape, double click.
I was just.
Because now we're going to get video feedback or something. Wait a minute, what's going on?
Do they have that?
Okay. Yeah. So the stuff that I'm trying to show you is a bit like video feedback. So I guess
we even get neurological feedback.
So, is that up there? State of the lattice site again, all that?
I can't see it.
We don't see your shared
Did
screen.
I share yet?
Did you click your...
Start sharing? So I did it. Click, say share.
You also get a prompt.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we are.
There it is.
So this is a thing that I've renamed Oscillite. There could be an OSA heavy version of it that does more stuff that you have to pay for.
An Aussie semi-bold.
But this is the free version. And so what we mean by field theory is that you don't see anything in here that looks like neurons, but the idea is that we have layers in the brain, and people think now that some of the deep layers, like maybe layer 5 and 6, are kind of like this big random cluster of excitatory and inhibitory neurons. And, you know, even though it's random, it's like if you change the ratio, the certain ratio of excitatory and inhibitory, in a way it reduces down to changing like some knob in a chaotic equation like this. Oh, and I guess this is not the software, so I can't really, I just have to let past me operate the knobs, and I will try to talk about it. But so what we're seeing with this thing running now is, you know, each point it's 100 by 100, which is when Google DeepMind does all these things, that's kind of the size of a network or an image that they work on. So but anyway, this is a simulation where each pixel or site here stands for maybe like 10,000 neurons, and they're following some simple equation that says, like, here's where I am now, plug it into the equation. So it's like recursive or like a fractal kind of thing that runs the same thing over and over and feeds back into itself. A little bit like video feedback. So anyway, there's an argument to be made that maybe this has something to do with neuroscience, and I have sort of packaged up this you know, free thing that I'm going to make available for people to experiment with this kind of flavor of neuroscience, which is a little bigger than it used to be. I'll call it oscillatory neuroscience, and the idea there is that some people think maybe this circuit idea isn't the best way to understand it, but it's these oscillations all over your brain. And maybe this is like one little piece of brain tissue that interacts with other pieces of brain tissue, and these knobs down here that are like the controls that are going to affect the patterns up there are what's happening when you get different brain regions interacting. So I don't know, like that.
So what's the data source for this?
It's just random numbers are starting off. So this is actually like something that was invented by physicists in the late 80s in the statistical mechanics area. Oh, wow. So it's a relatively small subset of neuroscience people that kind of know anything about this or would think it's relevant, I guess. But you know, those are my people. But a lot of them were like on the verge of retirement when I popped out of the chute with my PhD, and they were telling me like, no, you know, it's terrible times for us. Like our funding is threatened, and I'm like, wow, I don't know. And I was also, so one thing I will say about this idea of neuroscience is, like, if you've read anything about deep learning and these kind of networks, they have, in the simulations, they have literally millions of these, quote, neurons and weights. And this kind of bypasses that. Like, you don't have millions, you just have one equation, and you have these couple of variables, and then you have rhythm. So somewhere in here, there's this LFO button, and I don't think I've got to that part in the demo, but so when you start to see these knobs branch around, that's kind of when the rhythms. Okay, so now it's happening a little bit. Like, so for me, this is the idea here, is this is like the alpha rhythm in your brain, and then what you're watching on the screen is like gamma rhythms, which are like 40 hertz.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway. So that was a lot of noise about science.
So
I have one thing that I'm working on in my this glorious semi-unemployment world that I live in is I'm going to let somebody use this in their psychology class at ACC. I'm going to give a 20-minute talk on neuroscience or something.
Oh, cool.
But it won't be a talk. It'll be a webinar, pre-composed webinar. So. And I guess, I think a point that I lost is if this idea is correct, then a lot of what various, well-funded companies are doing to make hardware that represents millions of neurons in these current simulations is possibly don't really need it. And that this kind of brain-like model would be a little bit scary, because you would be able to have something that works like your brain with much less computational power than we've heretofore assumed. And it's that, to me, that is a little bit threatening, and one of the reasons that somehow I don't work as hard to push it out in the world as I might, because, like, I kind of think we're not ready. But the optimistic part of me thinks that if we actually did understand how the parts of the world, of the brain, come together dynamically and kind of do this dance with one another to integrate all of our memory and everything that we see around us, to decide, like, what is it important to do right now, and how do I come together all of these parts as a unified organism to do something that, from a sort of organizational theory or political theory, that might actually be a good basis or platform to build on. But I feel like, in terms of AI and artificial neural networks or intelligence, this is sort of like this threading the needle, is that we should really understand that piece of it before we unleash this very powerful tool to oppressive forces, which I guess they're still
Or Legion.
So anyway, that's the heavy part. But so as I say, I did this stuff back in the 90s and the early noughts, and kind of didn't do too much with it for a while. I was working in the chip software and manufacturing world for a while there, and before and after. But about, I don't know, like 2013, I decided I got it in my mind, this thing to do an opera, which is going to run streaming on the Vortex Theater channel on Thursday, May 21st at 8 p.m.
Thursday, May 21st.
Yeah, and this same software is actually used. I hope for it to be used more pervasively, but it kind of came together. I was working on that, and I was writing 2 hours worth of conventional music at the same time. But the original concept was that all of this is about a physicist who, in real life, his dreams were analyzed by Carl Jung and in this book, Psychology and Alchemy. And so the several dreams would be part of the opera, and the dream music would all be dreamed up by the network that you saw, which for the purposes of this opera, it had its own character name, the homunculus. If you could see this little blue dot up there, that was the homunculus on the stage, and then sometimes the swirling pattern stuff would happen behind it, and so various dream sequences did use that early versions of this kind of computer music method that I developed, out of this. So my dream was to have an artificial brain that would play convincing music with like impressive timing that was emotionally meaningful, but was in no way derived from rules or having heard any other music or anything. It would just would emerge out of the physics. And that was kind of the dream of these two characters, Polly and Young, that they would find this math that underlied both matter and mind. So the very ending that I don't know how this video works on here, and I know you're not hearing any audio, but among other things, this opera it's kind of like the Goethe of Faust, who was, Goethe was both a scientist and an artist. So I guess he's an aspirational character. But so the ending involves this computer music making up chords and melodies that these people are listening to. They also have some rules about how they're doing a choral piece, which involves listening to fragments of things that they've heard in the opera, and somebody repeats it and somebody echoes the phrase, and they're supposed to all be listening to each other and listening to the music. It's pretty out there at the end, but some people really hated this opera because one of the things about
you haven't given the name of the opera though.
Yeah,
it's called For Fear the Glass May Shatter. And
I thought it was a great
one of the things that it does is sort of transitions throughout music of the 20th century. So in the beginning, the music is all very constrained. All the harmony is only 3 notes because one of Wolfgang Pauli's big contribution was to sort of figure out the 4th quantum number, which was spin. That kind of was a big thing in terms of understanding quantum mechanics. So yeah, the music is almost like a separate character, and it evolves as it did over the course of the century. And some people came in and said, wow, I thought this was going to be a super experimental opera. And I'm like, yeah, you just kind of have to roll with it. Because I can assure you by the ending, it is pretty strange there. What she do? So we've been talking about quantum mechanics and math and all this stuff, but by the end, we've got like the ancient elements: earth, air, fire, and water.
Remember that part? That was great.
Michelle Hache is about to break some glass in the, not with her voice, but with a sword. And she's going to do a little divination operation. And however many pieces that somebody in the audience sees, we're gonna rebirth the universe up in the booth. So that software that we're looking at, some other people have used it as a kind of particle theory model.
Okay.
And if I'm properly giving the demo and taking a little bit more time, you can maybe understand how that makes some sense. It's like string theory level particle stuff. So here we just got a universe that's born, and it's
there it is.
It's born as a mandala, so it sort of expands out from a seed. Well, okay, how about another universe? So
keep them coming.
Keep them coming. So that's. I mean, I don't know if I should give away the ending here, but I think I wanted to kind of prep people, because I think it's one of these things where if you come in, like, the beginning it strikes you a little bit strange, like, why are all the songs waltzes? And so there was an art movement that was very mathematically informed called the Aleppo literary movement. And I think it's kind of fair to say this is like an Aleppo opera, because the initial lyrics up until Polly's introducing the number 4 is I also use this this idea of like the atomic shell. So you always have like 2 in the first energy level, and then there's a pattern, and that pattern is actually kind of like the syllable pattern that the lyrics are. So in this sense, it's kind of like a poetic form that is derived from the atomic energy levels.
Wow.
I don't know. Where did I come up with this idea?
How long did it take you to write the opera?
9 months.
Wow.
It's like having a baby. And the production that we saw is, it wasn't complete. There were actually a few pieces that had to be cut because mostly we didn't really have time to rehearse them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there we go. So that same software that you saw simulating is now it's running, but it's a liquid that just spilled out of the grail.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's also like swirling around on the floor.
Yeah.
Because in the script it says the audience should be like submerged in this liquid of vibrating particles. It's always
we are.
It's a challenge to make that happen.
I don't know where you are right now, Maggie, but I am coming over.
All right. Well, anyway,
This is the kind of stuff I think about a lot. Sorry. What inspired you to? Didn't you get your undergrad in music theory? Music?
No, it was electrical engineering.
Okay, so you started there.
I did take some. I took music appreciation classes, and I took. And I was already playing keyboards in bands and played by ear. I was kind of barely learning to play jazz. Not really as an undergraduate, but I hung out with people that did.
Yeah.
And I took some electronic music courses in the University of Illinois Music Studio, which was one of the old from the 50s. It is actually name checked in the opera.
Oh,
because
wow.
these particular physics in real life were very interested in music. Like Heisenberg was a concert pianist,
What sparked the interest in neuroscience? What catalyzed that?
It's. I guess when you're interested in life in general and being a human and artificial intelligence, and so in the 80s when I was kind of coming up, there was also the beginnings of complex system theory and chaos and fractals, and you could kind of, depending on your pathway to discovery about all these things, like I sort of came to believe that these were relevant in neuroscience, and so I kind of pieced together my own particular variation, and I had a few people who thought, yeah, maybe you're onto something. Was asked sometime within the last 10 years to try to write a review of this particular branch of neural oscillations, because that guy who founded one of the conferences in computational neuroscience said, in general, I would say the field is moving a little bit more in your direction.
Okay.
And that's kind of open to interpretation, but I feel like, I don't know if it's completely true, but I can kind of make a case for it. So one of the things that I'm doing is just trying to kind of figure out a way to essentially rebrand it or re-explain it in terms of everything that's happened in the last 20 years.
Okay.
And also kind of package it in this idea that it's really important that we understand what has been called coordination dynamics. Like, how do you take a complex system and make all the parts play nice together to maintain itself and to get something done, and not just to say, whoa, what about this little part that recognizes visual things and it's put into a smart weapon, or so that's kind of my dream, but I think it's not, it's really nothing that prevents it from going the other way, the bad way, even if you do everything that you could do.
Well, and that's a good segue, because I was going to ask, when you're talking about sort of the dark forces taking
Yes.
control, that what are I mean, don't get too specific, because I don't want them to hear anything. But,
I'm sure they're
but
not
like
listening.
what could what could go wrong? Like what are some of the negative uses of this?
Well, I think if you have something that is genuinely intelligent, there are the sort of flamboyant science fiction things that people worry about, like turning the world into paper clips, or just creating something that is somehow more powerful than you.
Mm-hmm.
And while that is legit, I think there are so many, worse things that we hit before that, just in terms of autonomous weapons that we already have, in terms of, automation that is imposed on society without its will, because we have kind of a very primitive operating system in governments. And so I think sort of understanding the ways that, different forms of integration and memory and learning are sort of brought together in real time in the moment in our brains would be a great model for how to redesign, the government operating system.
Yeah, but people fear Skynet. They think that there's going to be this super intelligent, somewhat subtle and sophisticated AI, and AI just isn't like that. I mean, it's sort of whatever you make it. But to me, the real concern is that there's a power in AI, and the power of its capabilities as an instrument, not as a self-directing intelligence. And I think that that's the real worry, is that we build things. I mean, one possibility is that we give all of the responsibility for control to something that has bugs, basically. I mean, and they're very subtle bugs, and they crop up in ways
Like
that we
people.
don't really catch.
Or
Like
the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But I personally think that people think wrongly about the real danger of AI, and that it's not, even if they're thinking in a more sort of utopian way about like Robbie the robot. I don't think we're going to have Robbie the robot, but we're going to have technologies that are able to take on a lot and carry a lot of weight. There was a really good exercise I did, Maggie, you might have been involved in this too, with Jake Dunnigan, where he was talking about like the mayor's office of a town in New England.
The government of the future thing.
Yeah, the government of the future, the mayor's office of the
Yeah.
future. And part of the conceit, part of the story, the backstory for this was that at some point they had handed over the responsibility for being mayor to an AI, and that a lot of cities had done that, and that at the point of the story we were in, they had outlawed that. They had said, you can't make an AI the mayor anymore because it's a disaster, because the AI just really can't work things out at a level of kind of subtlety and judgment that a human can. So it was okay to keep your AI and have it as a decision support system, but you couldn't really hand the decision over to the AI anymore.
Plus, you couldn't bribe them, and that
would really screw things up.
What about dog mayors?
Yeah, that's a better idea, I think.
I think it's a great idea. Did any of you ever watch Veep?
No, that
With
was a
Julia
woman though,
Louis
not a
Dreyfus?
dog, right?
Well, one of the guys who comes to work for her, and some of the other people, he beat a dog to be mayor. He actually went up head to head with the dog, and the dog was the incumbent, and he beat him. It was great.
His bark
Yeah.
was worse than his bite.
I worked for a
Exactly.
robotics company for a while that was
Oh,
very
yeah.
ambitious about this artificial general intelligence. And
Yeah, you built Philip Dick, right?
yeah, we brought a Philip K. Dick robot to town.
Nice.
I never saw that. You know, I missed every
I'm
opportunity.
sorry
to
that
see
you did not
Philip
get
Dick
to
thing.
interact with that. I mean, it was
That's a shame.
it was a kind of sideshow at South by Southwest somewhere 2016, 17.
That sounds
maybe.
about right.
Did you hit it with a pink light from outer space?
Well, that's a good story for another time. I'm technically not supposed to talk about what.
Ah!
I think it's.
Have y'all seen?
Actually, we
But I
have
had a
gone
point.
past our hour.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. We have.
I want to hear Dave's story
because we're
real
having
quick.
so much fun.
Well,
But
I was
Dave,
just like-
continue, and then we'll wrap.
I
Yeah.
had spent a year basically being the support system or nurse or caretaker for a German Shepherd that had degenerative myelopathy, which gives you progressive paralysis starting in the back. And we actually had a great time together. She swam for a long time after her back legs were gone.
Aw.
We had a strap, so we would go on long hikes with me being her rear end. We chased a
Aw.
goose once.
All right.
I got to
Wow.
know what it was like to be a dog in the backyard and where you
Wow.
would go. And sometimes we'd like
Nice.
lay out there in the moonlight, just so I kind of got to know the dog world pretty intimately and had
Lucky you.
could say a dog person. And so I go to this thing where they're talking about, they basically want you to pledge allegiance to the artificial general intelligence future, that we will build our benevolent, saviors. And I said, I'm not even reared so far from being able to emulate the intelligence of a smart mom and dog
Aw, yeah.
that let's see if we can get there,
So we're at Trump level now.
That's where
I'm just I never have watched a lot of stuff because I'm always busy doing something else, but like everyone else, I'm catching up on things now. And one of the shows is Silicon Valley. I just saw the episode where they had the kind of.
What do you think? Is it good?
Oh my God, I love that show. Anyway, but it's like the 5th season or so. I don't know, but it's something about the robot, the AI, this female AI entity, and her developer, and he's like sexually assaulting her basically. It's really horrible, but it's really funny, and the whole episode brought up a lot of thoughts about her own intelligence and trying to get away from that.
Right.
It was really good, and I was thinking about you, Dave, when I was watching that episode.
I don't have any stories like that partly because this robot was just a head. I guess you could assault it, but one of the weird things that happened in that job was I did a lot of different things, but for a long time I was in charge of not completely in charge of the conversation, but in part of the technical part of the conversation system. And we had a server, an Amazon server, that when you would talk to this thing, the real robot or the simulations that the developers had, it would send your speech, Google would translate it to words and send it to the robot. The robot would send its words back and it would speak, speech synthesis. And but there was a server out there running all the time that you could interact with if you figured out that existed, either by just walking in on the real robot or talking to it online. And we were always trying to measure whether the robot was getting better or not. That was part of the job for a while. So we would have people go through and grade the conversations, like good answer, bad answer. And we would like to percent of good answers to always be going up. So I'm looking at these logs, and over the Christmas holiday one year, somebody's doing this sexy chat with the robot.
What?
Whoa.
Yeah, that's totally what this episode was about. Yeah.
Who is doing this?
Yeah. Yeah.
On Christmas in Hong Kong, or because the center of development was in Hong Kong. I guess it could be anywhere, but not that many people. It was mostly people that worked at the company.
Yeah.
About this thing, and I'm like, which one of you freaks?
I know. That's what I was thinking. Maybe Mike Judge was in
Christmas.
on that. I don't know. That's totally this episode. I'm gonna find that episode and I'm gonna send you all the link. It is pretty interesting. Anyway.
All right.
Well, shall we wrap?
I don't know. I don't think I can top that story. So just a word from our sponsors. I'm enjoying this
What do we have?
relevant
Le Fin du Monde. Wow.
Excellent.
brewed in Montreal.
So David, will you come back again sometime? This has been fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and keep working up the Plutopia marching song. We want to have that at the start.
But I would actually propose to let you guys sample some different choices for theme song. I've got a lot of others. I mean, you found that one out that's been sitting on well.com since 1995 or something. You know, I've done some music since then that actually has more stellar production values, but I think that one has its charm.
Yeah, we definitely need
analog synthesizer, which is sitting back here under a veil, so none may know. Anybody that wanders in just goes, "What's this fugly piece of fabric?"
That's awesome.
Thought this guy had good taste.
And we do appreciate the use of the music.
Yes.
This has been fun. We do it every week at this time, more or less.
You want to cue the music, Scoop?
You can stay in touch with Plutopia at plutopia.io. On Facebook, look for @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. With John Lebkowsky, I'm Scoop Sweeney. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.